Okay, so that's us recording, and with that in mind, we will begin the session today. So welcome and thank you all for coming along to our session this afternoon on the topic of Is a PhD for me? Now, my name's Craig Phillips, like I said, and I'm the Assistant Director for Career Management at the University of St Andrews Careers Centre, and I'm delighted to welcome you all here today. Now, just to provide a quick overview, studying for a PhD represents a popular career path at the University of St Andrews. It's very popular for our students, whether it's studying here at the institution itself or at another university across the world. And at the Career Centre, we know that there are a really wide range of career opportunities and paths that are open to students to study at. Now, our destination information is a ongoing conversations with alumni tell us that many of our PhD graduates from the institution are achieving career success within and outside of academia across the world. Many of our students want to learn more about what's involved in studying for a PhD and how to make that actually happen. And this is why we're running the event today. And on that note, we have a fantastic panel of speakers this afternoon who offer a breadth and depth of practical experience and advice for you. Before I introduce them, I'm going to add that each panellist will speak about a different topic related to PhD study. We'll then open it up for questions after members of the panel have spoken, and we'll take the questions that have come from the meeting chat box. So if you do have questions, there'll be time to ask them in the second half of the session, but please use the meeting chat box as we go. We're going to pick out key themes from the questions and then pose them to the panellists. And then thereafter, we'll compile all of the questions from today along with answers in a document for sharing after the session for all registered participants. I really hope you're going to enjoy today's session. And like I was saying, we've got a really good panel of speakers. So without further ado, I'm just going to introduce them quickly and then we'll start going through the content from each panellist. So I'm delighted to welcome Monique Mackenzie, who is the University of St Andrews Provost and Head of St Leonard's College. We also have Malcolm White, who's a Professor in the School of Biology. We're also joined by our colleagues Vicky Kinnaman from the Scholarships team and Liliana Martins-Kaneko, who is a manager in the Registry post team. And we're also joined by a current PhD student in the School of International Relations, Flaminia Inchechi. And I'll be speaking on behalf of the Career Centre as well. So like I was saying, I hope you really enjoy today's session, that you find it informative and that you use it as a really good opportunity to ask questions and learn more. So without further ado, I'll pass over to Monique. And Monique, if you're ready, over to you.
Thanks very much, Craig, and a very warm welcome to this event today. As Craig said, my name is Monique and I'm an Assistant Vice Principal or Provost here at the University of St Andrews, and all that means is that I spend most of my life thinking about postgraduate students here at St Andrews. So that's all Master students and all PhD students. As Craig also mentioned, I'm the Head of St Leonard's Postgraduate College, which at the moment is still a virtual home for postgraduate events and training, but it is soon to have a physical home by the next academic year. We should already have been in that space, but the COVID pandemic has set us back a bit in our use of the teaching estate. So it is wonderful to see so many of you here. We've got a lot of people on the call I see today, because even considering taking on a PhD is both exciting and terrifying. And so for exactly these reasons, the more you can understand about a PhD program, the better. I mean, personally speaking, graduating with a PhD has been life-changing. I was the first person in my large family to even go to university, let alone complete a PhD in statistics. And even then, I was totally unaware of the possibility qualification can bring. And while it's exciting, PhD education will, however, feel pretty different to your previous academic training. And that's because PhD programs have a very large element of independent learning, which might be pretty uncomfortable at first, but it's both necessary and probably the best part actually of these programs. So a PhD will involve taking responsibility for your own learning in terms of self-organisation, motivation, and the acquisition of knowledge. And while it will be challenging, getting a PhD will set you apart from the rest of the crowd. And that's not because undergraduate or somehow worth less than it used to be, but because the world needs more people like you who are educated to a higher level than ever before. And that's because the world's becoming ever more complex, and we need highly educated people to ask very specific questions about very complicated problems from a variety of perspectives. And our world also needs people to communicate these issues to a range of audiences more than ever before. So that requires scholars from the arts and the humanities and the sciences to work together somehow, and a PhD program is a really good example of how that can work. So you are not an irrelevant elite. And as a PhD student, you'd be joining a group of peers who are front row and centre in an area of research, and you will be helping to unpick the very stickiest of problems. A PhD will certainly equip you with research experience. It'll give you problem-solving skills, mental agility, and perhaps more surprisingly, a great deal of emotional resilience. And those are skills that are going to help us in whatever career we choose and in our roles as family members, friends, and global citizens. And these skills are ever more necessary as we come to terms with how the global pandemic is everything around us, including the job market. So the working life you can go on to post-PhD, I'm sure Craig will talk more about, but it is incredibly diverse. So you might end up furthering your research field for the rest of your life. You might find a related job that's not even in research, but relies extensively on your experience. That's quite common. Or you might end up working completely outside the academy and completely outside your research area, which quite honestly might be quite welcome after you finish the PhD. So I'll let you get on with the event. I'll be here to answer any questions with Craig and others on the panel. It's really wonderful to have the opportunity to say hello to you here. One of the great things about St Andrews, if you're not with us already, is that it is small. So please do get in touch with us if you've got any questions about the potential program or what your time might look like at St Andrews. So welcome to the event, and feel free to ask us any questions. Back to you, Craig.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Monique. And I'm sure we're going to have a lot of questions for you as we go today. So I would like to move on to Malcolm White, who is a professor in the School of Biology and is going to offer a perspective on what supervisors are looking for and broader academic perspectives. So Malcolm, over to you.
Great, thanks, Craig. Now I can share my slides. Is that the best thing to try
if you're
first?
happy doing that, yep.
Yeah, sure.
And if there are any technical difficulties, Malcolm, I'll share, but we can see them. That's great.
All right.
So over to you, Malcolm.
Good. Hello, everyone. My name's Malcolm White. I'm a professor of biochemistry in the School of Biology. I've been in St Andrews for the past 20 years. I'd like to give you a perspective that is maybe the sort of science perspective on PhD study, and I'm aware that it can be quite different doing a PhD in, say, the arts versus the sciences. So some of what I say may not apply to the arts or humanities to the same extent. So PhDs in science generally are at least 3.5 years or often 4 years long, and those are usually funded positions. Where you get a stipend, which is usually around about 15k per annum. That's enough to live on. You know, you're not going to get rich doing a PhD, but it does mean that you can do your PhD and not have to worry about working part-time, for example. Self-funding is not unheard of, but it's quite unusual in the sciences. And so generally people are on funded positions. And the funding is generally coming from all sorts of different places. A big source are the research councils that fund research in the UK, like the BBSRC. Lots of charities also fund PhD positions. And there are also sources of money for overseas students from the Commonwealth funding, and also funding through the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Generally, it's a funded position, and generally, you're not having to make up a PhD project from scratch, okay? So I think this is another point of difference in the sciences compared with the arts, you don't completely propose your PhD project from scratch. Usually you're moving into a lab which has a research program, and where they may already have written the outline of the PhD project in order to get the funding. That doesn't mean it's all set in stone, and as you go through your PhD, you will be taking a role in developing the direction in which your PhD goes. But the initial project area tends to be defined to start with. Okay, so just to give you an outline for how the PhD application process works. Now, this is really in St Andrews, but many of these points are relevant across certainly the UK. We're already in full swing in terms of PhD recruitment. In fact, some institutions have already closed their PhD recruitment. Not many, but the Crick Institute, for example, in London, had a closing date in November. For many institutions, closing dates are in December or January. So you need to really get moving now if you're interested in applying. Almost all positions in the UK are advertised on findaphd.com, and I recommend you look there for projects. You can search that for particular topics or particular universities, etc., and find out more about the projects. They're probably also advertised on the university's web pages, and that's the other place you can go to look at projects. We will try to, in St Andrews, draw up a first list of potential students for interview by the end of December or early January. And if there is still money available in any of the schemes, then we might advertise a second round in the spring. But I would not recommend that you wait for that round to be advertised before applying for studentships. Now is the time to start doing it. So as it works in biology, generally, supervisors will get a number of applicants for their advertised position, and they will select maybe one or two candidates. So they're going to look at your CV, your cover letter, your letters of recommendation, and choose the top one or two candidates to put forward for an interview. And that interview, in normal times, that interview is usually in person, unless there's a reason you can't travel to St Andrews. And I think if you can get an in-person interview, it's obviously better. It allows you to visit the university, to meet more people, to visit the labs, to get a feel for the town, etc. Right now, this year, it may still not be very possible, in which case it might be done over Skype or Teams, something like we're doing today. In biology, what we do is we have a panel, which is a recruitment panel that sees all the candidates from a particular part of biology, let's say biochemistry, and they will essentially interview them and rank them. And so you have to be ready for an interview by a fairly non-specialist panel of academics, who then will try to develop a ranked list, or perhaps set a quality bar where they can say, well, the candidates above this point are all appointable. In normal years in biology, we have maybe just over 200 applicants for PhDs, and typically we'll take about low 20s number of entrants. Now that sounds scary, but you have to bear in mind that many of those applicants, particularly the best quality applicants, are actually applying to lots of different places. So this is a two-way interview. We're interviewing you, you're interviewing us. We might decide we aren't going to make you an offer. You might decide to go somewhere else, right? So don't be put off by numbers like that, sort of, which looks like a 90% unsuccessful rate. The reality is really not that stark at all. So what are we looking for in PhDs? Some of these things are completely obvious, I think. We're looking at a good academic record. Lab experience is a real bonus. Those two things, I think, mean that people with a master's degree are already at an advantage. They have a degree awarded under their belt, unlike a first degree where it might not be awarded before applying for a PhD. They also tend to have a lot more lab experience. Any lab experience you can get in the course of your undergraduate and master's studies is really valuable. And we do look for people who've maybe done a bit of placements in the summertime, for example. But you might have, in a master's degree, you might have done a 6-month research project. That's all great for a PhD student. Another thing we're always looking for is enthusiasm. We want to find people who are really enthusiastic about science, who have questions about science, like really strong reasons to want to do a PhD. And it may seem trivial, but sometimes if you get asked, why do you want to do a PhD, applicants don't often have a very good answer. So, you want to think about these sorts of questions as you prepare for an interview. So because it's a two-stage process, your first stage really is to get yourself an interview. I would recommend that you contact potential supervisors directly. So you might want to initially email them. If you're going to take that approach, I would suggest you write to them. You make sure it's personalized. It doesn't look like a form email that you've sent to several people. You might want to say that you've seen their position online, you're interested in this area of research. You might want to say that you've had a read of a couple of their papers and find them very interesting, and ask them what the possibility is for PhDs. That already gets your name noticed. And remember, the most popular supervisors might have to choose from amongst 10 or 20 applicants and can only select 1 or 2 of those just for interview. At the bottom there, you can see a real quote from a PhD applicant I had, and that's just a reminder, please proofread everything. That's a sentence that's a real hostage to fortune there. Okay. So let's say that you get invited for interview. That's great. That has to happen. You've really got a good chance of getting a PhD. You need to do a lot of work. Treat it like a job interview. You want to practice, I would suggest. Work out what they want you to do. So they may want you to talk for 10 minutes on your most recent research project. Have that all prepared and a smooth presentation. Know your audience. So be aware that the people in the panel are likely to not be specialists in the particular area you're applying for your PhD. You need to be able to talk to about science in a more general way. And as I said before, we're looking for enthusiasm and knowledge, understanding, and motivation to do a PhD. If you do get an interview, particularly if you can visit, I would strongly recommend you try to build in a visit if it's at all possible, even if it's before the actual interview, to find out about the lab. You are going to commit 4 years of your life to this position. It's important. It's a really important decision for you as well as the supervisor. Talk to the people in the lab if you can. Learn about the lab. Is it a friendly lab? How does it work? How is it structured? Is the supervisor there quite often, or are they always traveling? And be nice to everybody you meet on the day. Sometimes some of the people who are deciding whether you get appointed are not the people you might think. Labs run as often as a team. Everybody has to work together sometimes, as well as driving their own research. And we do value people who will fit into a group and work effectively. So those are some tips, and I'm very happy to address questions later as they come up, but I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
That's great, Malcolm. Thank you very much for that. It was really informative. And I think that a large proportion of what you said is applicable to arts and humanities as well. What I would encourage students who are thinking about an arts and humanities PhD is, in the first instance, to speak to lecturers and academics within your own school and ask them for advice, or to be signposted where you can find more information, because many schools hold events as well as the university itself, so they'll also be a really good source of support. So thanks very much for that, Malcolm. Moving on, Liliana, would you be able to speak now on behalf of Registry?
Hi there, that's perfectly fine. Thanks, Craig. Hi, my name is Liliana Martins-Icaneco. Thanks so much, Craig. That was great pronunciation of my name. I think it's one of the best I've had. Thank you. I manage the PGT team and PGR teams in registries. We hold all the systems and the application forms that you would be using to apply to a PhD. There's lots of good advice here at this session today. I think what I would like to draw your attention to is to some of the deadlines we have already in place. As Malcolm said, there's quite a few things that have actually closed for the next academic year. Within the programs that we offer in St. Andrews, the School of Classics has had a big deadline of Monday, the 30th of November. So if you are interested in the School of Classics, get in touch with them ASAP. There might still be a way. Divinity, that's the Friday, the 4th of December. International relations is quite popular, will be the Friday the 11th of December. And psychology, they will have the 8th of January. If you didn't quite catch all of that, I will send you the link later on with those deadlines. The thing to retain is make sure that you approach your supervisor before you submit the application. That already takes you to a really good steading on your application. There's lots of applications that we see coming through that actually the student has not even started their research path. So get in touch with the supervisor, visit the schools, even if virtually, make sure that you get to know what you're signing up for, and also that you do your homework before you get started on this big project. You would be able to contact my team on any questions with regards to applications. I'll make sure that I will put the contact details on the chat box as well. It's very easy. It's pgr.application. So if you have any queries on references, documents, verifications, all sorts of things, please get in touch. You would normally be able to get two types of offer: a conditional offer if we find that you're not quite there yet and you might need to complete your master's program, or unconditional offers, and those are the type of offers that you would be getting from us if you are a chosen applicant to be studying with us. I think that's probably it from me, and best of luck with whatever you decide to do next.
That's great, Liliana.
Thanks,
Thank you very
Greg.
much for that. And if you're able to put the links into the meeting chat for just now, that would be great. And then we can also circulate them thereafter. But we know that we get a lot of a lot of questions at the Careers Centre about the processes for applying. And I'm sure we'll get more questions as the session goes on later. So thanks very much for that, Liliana. Vicky, would you be happy to speak now from your perspective in scholarships?
Yep. Hi, so my name is Vicky. I am the PG Scholarships Administrator. So I administer all the scholarship applications that come in through our own university system. We administer usually the university scholarships, so that's university money and also donor money that comes in through development. And they're all advertised on our website. So again, I'll put the link to our website in the chat after I finish speaking. All our scholarships can be applied for through MySane, or we do advise that you don't apply for the scholarships until you've submitted your course application for a PhD. That's so that your scholarship application can be linked to the correct application in the system. And in MySane and My Application, you're able to view the scholarships and funding catalogue. So you go in, there is a drop-down menu that you select the academic year that you want to apply for, and you select the level of study that you're doing as well. We also advise people to check with their academic schools as well. They may have some funding available that you can apply for. That may be done through our scholarship system, or it may be done just through your course application, and they may make the decision through that. Just a quick couple of deadlines. The Wolfson and Carnegie scholarships, they're quite popular ones. Their deadline is the 12th of January at the moment. The majority of other scholarships will close on the 28th of January. But as I say, all the scholarships are advertised on our website, and all the deadlines are up on the website, relevant website pages, so double check there. Okay, and that's it from me at the moment.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Vicky. Again, we know that from our interactions with students who are very interested in embarking on further study, particularly at PhD level, funding and scholarships is a very key concern for many of them. So we get asked about this a lot, and I've included some links where to find funding, in addition to all of the information that is coming through in the meeting chat box. There's lots of really good information for everybody. So I'd like to now move on to, we've been hearing from university colleagues and staff, and I would like to now introduce my former colleague Flaminia Anchetti, who is a final year PhD student in the School of IR, and Flaminia can offer her perspective on what it's like to go through the PhD and some factors that are worth considering when embarking on it. So Flaminia, are you ready to speak?
I'm here. Hi, Greg. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Over to you.
Great, thank you. Hello, everybody. As Craig said, I am a final year PhD student. Actually, final month, because my deadline is Christmas Day. So I'm actually submitting my first draft today. So it's a very exciting time for me. But I'd like to talk about how my journey started. So I was at St. Andrews for a master's in philosophy when I decided that that I wanted to keep studying. I made a lot of applications and wrote a lot of proposals and contacted a lot of potential supervisors. But eventually I decided to stay in St. Andrews mainly because I met with my current supervisor, which is something I would really advise you to do. And I really liked her, and I knew that you know, it was her that I wanted to work with. So I decided to stay, and I really liked working with my supervisors because of the autonomy that they gave me. They were always very encouraging that I be independent and follow my interests along with my research. So during the PhD, I organized the 5 conferences with generous support from the university. The latest of which I actually organized with Imperial College, and it was about transitioning from academia to consulting. I also worked with 2 journals. I taught like most PhD students do, and I also taught in 3 high schools during my time. I also worked with Craig at the Career Center, and you know, all of these were just fantastic opportunities to build up my portfolio of skills. And a PhD is fantastic also because, you know, you get to research or something you're interested in. You meet very interesting people along the way. You grow immensely as a person. You become insanely resilient. But also you have the opportunity to develop skills that are really, really valuable on the job market, and not just the academic job market. So about a year and a half ago, I became very interested in the idea of moving beyond academia. And specifically, I knew that management consulting was what interested me. Obviously, my background is in philosophy and international relations, so I was worried about that transition. So I relied a lot on the support of my colleagues at the Career Center, who, you know, were wonderful in putting my CV together, and I eventually secured the job offer in March. So this was right before COVID, in management consulting, which was the field I wanted. So that goes to show you don't necessarily need to follow the academic route if you're no longer interested in it, which can happen, as it did to me. I still loved my work, but I knew I wanted to do something different after. A final thing, because I realized that I've taken up a lot of time already, is a word about the transitioning from PGT to PGR. So a master's program is very intense, at least I know I found mine very intense. Back-to-back deadlines, classes, assignments, continuously. But a PhD is not like that. A PhD is a marathon. And you have to reflect on how to approach it in a way that's sustainable for you. People can help you, and you're never alone. A PhD might feel like something isolating, but actually there are a lot of people that are going through the same journey as you. And thankfully, St. Andrews, with its size, is not very difficult to meet them. So keep an eye on yourself and how you approach your work, because that makes all the difference, precisely because, you know, it's a 4-year feat, which isn't little. And one really has to kind of renegotiate with themselves how they work and how they approach work. I think that's it for me. If you have any questions, of course, the chat box is there, but also feel free to email me at fi7@standrews. That's F India 7. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Flaminia. And I'm sure there'll be questions for you about your PhD experience. So I would just like to speak for a short moment on behalf of the Career Centre, just outlining some of the career-related support that is available to PhD students at the University of St Andrews. Before we move on to questions for our panellists, I would just remind everybody, please feel free to add your questions into the meeting chat, and you can do that just now as well, and then we'll pick out some of them for our panellists. I'm hopeful we're going to have about 15 to 20 minutes for questions, so there'll be a good opportunity to ask them. So, talking about the support that's available for University of St Andrews PhD students, there's a misconception that the careers support is only available for undergraduates, when in fact it's available for postgraduate students and indeed staff. And for our PhD students, they can get support from the University of St Andrews Careers Centre throughout the duration of their PhD and up to 3 years after they graduate. And we provide support for our PhD students in 4 key ways. We provide them with up-to-date labour market information about recruitment processes in different labour market sectors, and we do that through our Career Centre website, standrews.ac.uk/careers, and I'll put the questions into the meeting chat. I'll put the link in the meeting chat shortly after. We also have a weekly newsletter that goes out to all students about what's going on in the university and in the labour market, called Career Matters. And we're increasingly engaging students on social media as another way to keep up to date and be aware of what's going on. So we provide career information which is helpful for students when exploring different options and paths. Now, in addition to information, we offer advice and guidance, and we have a team of professionally trained advisors who work with specific academic schools as well as students of any discipline. And we're very used to working with PhD students, whether they have no ideas about what they want to do. Some ideas are very clear ideas, and it's not uncommon for PhD students and their career ideas to change during the course of their PhD. So there's a lot of advice and guidance that's available to PhD students too. Because of the reputation of St Andrews globally with employers, it's also heavily targeted by employers and organisations who often want to come on campus. At the moment that's virtual, but to deliver presentations and workshops and attend our career fairs and themed weeks, so that they can talk to students, particularly PhD students, about what they do and get them interested in those different sectors, with a view to them applying for that after their PhD. And then finally, in addition to that, we also offer access to opportunities. So Flaminia is a really good example of a PhD student that has undertaken different roles alongside her PhD, from, for example, teaching and tutoring in the School of International Relations, to having a part-time job at the Career Centre, to editing an academic journal as well. So there are lots of opportunities for PhD students to develop academically alongside working, whether that's part-time work or within their school, etc. And we advertise posts like that through Career Connect, which is the university's online careers platform. And then finally, the other way that we provide access to opportunities is through hosting and coordinating a range of different work experience opportunities. And because of the strength of the alumni community and alumni network at St Andrews, many of our alumni want to give back. And that's why we have different programs like Work Shadowing and Coffee Connect. And that gives current students the opportunity to meet with and shadow alumni in their place of work, or have really important career-related conversations to help broaden their horizons and awareness of the labour market. At the Career Centre, we also really value the skills and qualities that our PhD students bring, which is why we hire many PhD students, for example, in some of our initial advisory roles, and we have intern roles that students work in. So we currently have 3 PhD students working for us, and more recently hired 2 PhD graduates who have joined our team as careers advisors. And at the Careers Centre, we firmly believe that careers outside of academia for our PhD students is most definitely not a consolation prize. And we're here to support students whether they want to pursue careers in academia or outside of them after they graduate from their PhD. So I hope that was informative. I've really valued the input from all of our speakers today. And before we move on to question and answers, I'd like to thank them for their inputs. You can probably hear the meeting chat is going quite well. There's lots of questions and links coming in. So I would encourage everyone to read through that. Now, what we're going to do is, because we've got about 15 minutes or so for questions, we'll start working through them. And then, like I was saying earlier, we'll compile a list of the ones that we've not been able to answer and get back to everybody soon after the session today. So what I would like to pose first of all is a question to Malcolm and Monique, and it's come from Izzy. And Izzy has asked, who is the best person to be your referee? Is it a supervisor or an academic advisor? And then in addition to that, what if I have no connections here, but I have not, well, what happens if I've got connections here, but I've not worked with that individual for a while? So any thoughts from Monique or Malcolm on that in particular?
Maybe Malcolm wants to comment, since you take applications more often than I do through biology, at least. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, I can comment. I mean, obviously, you know, for any position you're applying for, a referee who knows you well and has direct experience, ideally of your lab work rather than just written work, is going to be beneficial, but it's not always possible. So if there's someone who's supervised you in a project, like a final year project or a summer project, definitely think about approaching them. If you're struggling to get your third referee, then it may be that your academic advisor is a good choice. I am an academic advisor. I write a lot of references for PhD students, PhD applications, but it's slightly more limited what I can say about that particular person. So people who know you best are going to be your best referees, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to support what Malcolm's just said. I mean, I actually read a lot of scholarship applications and help award the funding. And one thing that's quite striking is when you see, if you like, referees reports or letters of support, which are quite personalised. So it's that personalised element which makes the difference, I think, when you're reading applications for PhDs and usually also for funding. So just like Malcolm was saying, someone that knows you means that they can speak more freely about the person that they know, I think really helps.
Thank you very much for that. We've got another really good question now. It's potentially a difficult one, but I'd like to pose it for Flaminia, Monique and Malcolm. And it's from Holly. And Holly's acknowledged this is probably a very difficult question to answer, but how did you know that a PhD was right for you? Flaminia, would you like to start with that?
Sure. I mean, I guess I didn't. I was interested in you know, in a number of themes, and I was reading around and discussing it with people and thinking about it a lot. I mean, I guess my brain was very awake during my master's, and I was making a lot of connections and thinking about a lot of issues that I found interesting. Obviously, there was a lot about it that I didn't know. I didn't know what it would feel like. But you know, I jumped into sort of both feet, and I kept telling myself, at the end of the day, you can always quit, which obviously I never did, and I thought about doing during the process. It was just a joke. I was enthusiastic. I mean, obviously, there are moments that are more exciting than others, but that enthusiasm, that feeling of connectedness with my work, and the role my supervisors played in that was huge, absolutely huge, because you know that they see you growing and developing your ideas, and they really have a way to work. You know, the magic when you feel like the enthusiasm is sort of fizzling out a bit, as it's part of the process. One just has to work through it. So I'm sorry if I haven't really answered in the way you were expecting, but I feel like what I described is a truthful answer. Let me put it that way.
Thank you, Flaminia. No, that was really helpful. Monique, Malcolm, any thoughts from your own perspectives?
I can go quickly. Basically, I did my master's degree and then I went to work for a year as a statistician in the forestry organisation. It was a research organisation, and I just didn't feel like I was finished. I was suddenly bored again, much like Flaminia was saying. I felt kind of still connected to the work that I'd been learning about. So I decided I wasn't finished and ready to go back and do a PhD. So I went back to the PhD, even though I didn't really know much about it either. I think I probably should have looked into it a bit more, but yeah, that was it for me. Malcolm, what's your story?
Yeah, I mean, I would just briefly say that don't do a PhD because you can't think of anything else.
No.
That does happen. But if you really enjoy research, whatever sort of research it is, if you get a buzz from the research, the discovery, then you'll love your PhD, I think.
And just to add to that I see a lot in registries that it's that enthusiasm that Flaminia was talking about, and you could still see it in her after 4 years. She still has that enthusiasm, even though she's chosen a different thing. Is that find a supervisor that shares your enthusiasm, find the people who have that buzz that Malcolm was talking about, because it can be a lonely journey. It'll be your journey, it'll be your project that you're going to carry forward, and that will be a big difference from your master's program. Will be that you'll be doing this for 4 years. Is it right for you? Does it make you buzz? Does it make you feel this is good for me because I have this mind frame for it, and I'm surrounded by people who have the same sort of interests and will support me through this?
That's great, Liliana. Thank you very much for adding that. I would also just build on a point that Malcolm's made, and that we see lots of students who think about further study as an option because they don't know what they want to do. And we would strongly encourage you that if you are unsure about what you want to do, you're very welcome to come and have an appointment with a careers advisor at the Careers Centre to help you explore the range of options. It might be that further study is right for you, but at least having that initial appointment will help you explore all of the paths so that ultimately you can make an informed decision that will hopefully help you make more out of what you decide to do next. So that was a really great question, Holly. Thanks for asking it, and some really good answers there, which I'm sure would have benefited everybody in attendance today. We've got another question from Camilla, and it's a really interesting one. And she's asking the panel, is applying for a PhD harder if you're not currently in academia? So for example, you're taking a year out after your master's to build work experience. We get asked this a lot at the Careers Centre, so I really welcome input from any of our panellists to answer that.
Do you want to go first, Malcolm?
I'll go quickly. I would just say it can be a positive advantage, right? Often that extra year or two brings a whole new suite of skills to a PhD. However, I think what you do need to do is explain the path that you're taking. Why you now want to do a PhD. You have to have a good reason why you're now perhaps changing track from a slightly different profession, for example, to do a PhD. What's the reason? You're going to have some good reasons. So just be sure you can make that case both in your application and any interview that you have.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is a lot to be gained by taking a year out to do something that might be related or not, but to develop all sorts of other skills, because we've been talking about the fact that it's a 4-year program, and it's actually a very long professional relationship that you have with your supervisors and others, maybe in the lab or in your school. So I think it's a very important decision that you take, and bringing a bit of maturity to that, emotional, scientific, arts and humanities, wherever it's coming from, I think is a really important part of that experience. And that's something I certainly take into account too if I'm looking at applications, is, does this person have the life experience? What else have they been doing when they've been taking a year to do something different? What other co-curricular, extracurricular things have they been looking into? So I think that helps build a nice, well-rounded CV actually too when you apply. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks very much for that. And that actually probably answers Stephen's question about whether it's better to apply for your master's degree apply for the PhD during a master's degree, or perhaps wait until you're done with it. I think ultimately It's about when is right for you, when you feel ready to apply, when you're going to be able to produce the strongest application as well. So we've had lots of other questions, and another one that we have had is from Richard, and it's asking about the selection process for PhD programs. Does it take into account the nationality of the applicant for acceptance or funding? Can any of the panelists
I should be able to comment on that. Yeah. Sorry, I think that comes from an undergraduate perspective where there is a different number of students we can take. Certainly that's not the case when looking at applications. We don't really look at nationalities there. It will be looked at in terms of funding, whether, because tuition fees will have a different price, but we do not have a limit of spaces available depending on your nationality. I hope that answers the question.
And can I just add too that the university scholarship programs that we've had in place now for, I think it's the second year running this year, is completely blind to nationality. We just recruit the best and the brightest, and we're actually completely not interested what part of the world you come from, just that you're the best fit for the program and the supervisor in the school. So our university funding schemes now are completely not concerned about your nationality. Yeah, in a good way.
I'll just add in as well that some donor funding that is advertised will take into country of domicile. It won't take in nationality. It will take in maybe your current country of domicile. Okay. But each of the scholarship pages will show you what the criteria is.
Thanks very much.
Can I just add that? Sorry, just to say that Research Council funding, which is a big source of our funding, and there are restrictions about your country of origin. So the amount of funding available as for the stipend, for example, will depend on whether you're UK, EU, or an overseas nationality. So you do have to look into it.
Yeah, that's true, Malcolm. I mean, the nice thing is that the UKRI have actually lifted the restrictions, so up to 30% of the funded places can now be to international students. So they've now lifted the number that can be applied and allocated to international students. So that's something, a move in the right direction in my view. Yeah, but you did right. I mean, the different funding schemes, of course, have different requirements, but I think generally the move is towards greater diversity, which is what we're certainly trying to do here. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. And we've had another question related to funding, and it's about if you're paying your own way through, do you have to worry about Scottish funding deadlines? So, Vicky, do you feel that you or Liliana can answer that?
So if you're self-funded, if you're not getting any funding whatsoever from the university or that, then you won't have to follow any specific deadlines.
Only the application deadlines to your current school that you want, the school that you intend to apply for. What I would say is that also there's lots of discussion on funding, but don't forget there's also lots of loan opportunities. I do wonder whether that question was to do with the loans as funding instead of funding as in scholarships. So if you are looking at loan applications for the Scottish Government, look into their deadlines. But certainly there isn't a thing as such if it's not a loan question. I don't know if you want to clarify that question, the person that's asked that.
Yep. I'm just,
sorry to interrupt. I asked that question. So I'm going to be teaching. So I teach at New York University, and I'll be able to continue my teaching as I pursue the doctorate. So that was the reason for my question. I don't need to pursue outside funding, but then some of the people in my department mentioned that it was prestigious and that it was important to just try to, I guess, get anyway. So that was the initial reason for my question.
Okay, Rachel, I'll contact you and send you my, we can exchange more information and look into it into detail.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's great. Thanks very much for that. Now, Malcolm, we have a really interesting question I hope you can help with. Now, it's come from a student who's doing an MRes in marine biology, and they're very interested in developing a PhD from scratch with their supervisor. And what they're asking is, do you think that the application and selection process would differ to that of an advertised PhD, and whether you have any advice for seeking funding for such an independent venture?
I mean, I guess I would suggest first that you you talk to your potential supervisor, and explore that with them. They're probably in a good position to know about opportunities for funding. It's not fundamentally any different from applying for an advertised position. It can go through the same process of interview, etc. But if you are seeking the funding for it, you're basically going to be judged along with everyone else. So it's something I think you would need to ask your potential supervisor to look into. But I think you probably have to process through the normal route, from what I understand of the question.
Thanks very much for that, Malcolm. I'm mindful of time, so I think we'll take a couple more questions and then I'll collect them all and address the ones that haven't been answered. But we have a question from Natalie, and it's really interesting, and it's asking about whether you can go immediately from an undergraduate degree into a PhD, or whether you need to do a postgraduate master's first. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
From essentially, that doesn't seem to be a showstopper. Just remember, the focus is how good is your project? How good have you done your research that you can convince others in the panel that you are ready for a PhD? So it's not necessarily, I know some other institutions put it as a prerequisite. We are pretty much interested on the projects, but certainly essentially, I don't know if Malcolm would have more to add in terms of biology. But essentially, there are students, exceptional students, that go straight from an undergraduate to a PhD. It'll be a case on your project, whether you're ready for it, and all sorts of different variables that will need to align for that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's 50-50 in biology. So if you have a first-class degree, or you're in line to achieve a first-class degree, that's usually viewed as a strong indication that you can do a PhD. If it looks like you're on for a 2-1 or you have a 2-1, it might be harder, but it's not impossible, right? It depends on what other experience you have. So don't be put off. You don't have to do a master's in order to do a PhD.
I totally agree. And in fact, in some schools, I'm from mathematics and statistics originally. I mean, it's very rare actually you'd find somebody with a master's degree in between an undergraduate and a PhD. So it just really depends on the discipline, I think. But yeah, I mean, even from the regulatory point of view, you only have to have a 2-1 in order to qualify for entry into PhD. In the sciences, it's a bit more variable in the arts, I believe, which I'm less familiar with. But yeah, so it's definitely no showstopper, and it does absolutely matter what you do, as well as what's on the page in terms of credits and modules and so on. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. So I'm mindful of time. I think we'll take one last question, and I think it's quite a fitting question, and it's asking about to describe what the working week looks like as a PhD student. Like, what does the research look like? So Flaminia, Monique and Malcolm, if you'd be able to share some brief thoughts on that from all of your perspectives, I would really appreciate that. So Flaminia, would you like to start?
Sure. So mine was a desk PhD, in the sense that I didn't have any field work. So yes, most of my reading week was was about reading and writing and reflecting on what I was reading about. So the day-to-day, yeah, that's, in my experience, this is basically it. I mean, even up until the last moment, this is essentially, what you do. Then obviously there's, the more fun part about like the actual research. So going out of your way to find, really obscure books, really obscure articles, and sometimes you move around quite a bit to do that. I went to Italy, where I'm from, something like 8 times to find sources, and in general throughout the UK, I went to about, I think, 6 countries. So yeah, that's.
Yeah, Malcolm, Monique, would either of you like to share any thoughts?
I'll just say something quickly. I mean, I think you should kind of craft what you want to finish up looking like in terms of what you want to gain when you finish, and then work backwards, and then fill your weeks with those sorts of things that are going to get you to that point. I think it's really easy to put your head down and focus on the particular thing that you need to work on, and actually forget about the other things that you might be doing with us while you're here. And you won't miss you might miss the opportunities to pick up some training here and some personal development there, and all the things that make for a more well-rounded kind of graduate at the end. So I'd really encourage you to think about what you want to kind of finish up with, and what sort of skills and who you'd want to look like at the end, and then work backwards from there.
Thanks,
That's my love.
Yeah, I mean, so from the perspective of a lab-based practitioner, I suppose, you'd be working in the lab most days of the week, but you would also be doing courses. You might be demonstrating, so that's a sort of paid demonstrating of undergraduate students, which helps budgeting. You might attend 1 or 2 conferences in a normal year. It hasn't been a normal year this year, but let's hope we get back to normal. So you get the chance to travel, particularly once you have results to talk about. I treat PhD students as professionals. I don't monitor their time. They're in charge of their time in the lab, and sort of as long as they're getting things done and enjoying it, that's important. So it's very flexible. Should be a lot of fun.
Thank you very much for that. So that brings us to 2 o'clock and the end of the allotted time. First of all, on behalf of the University of St Andrews Career Centre, I would like to thank everyone for attending today. I hope you found it as interesting and informative as I have. We'll be sharing the recording with you all, and we'll follow up with an email with all of the key links from today and the answers to any of the questions that we were unable to answer. I would also like to offer a special thanks to our speakers today who have given up their time to help us all. I'd like to thank Monique, Malcolm, Liliana, Vicky and Flaminia for all of your brilliant help and advice and experiences today. So thank you very much, everybody, and we'll pick up the remaining questions and get back to everybody. I'm going to stop recording and bring the session to a close. So thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.